Okay, let's see if that works. We should be live. Hello, everybody. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. As usual, I'm not completely confident that I got it running, so please let me know if you can hear and see me. It works. Fantastic. Wow, look at all the people so quickly. Very nice to have you all here. It is Friday once again, and as we always do on Fridays, 4 p.m. Swedish time, SerenityOS office hours. So format hasn't changed. If you are new here, what we do is we talk about SerenityOS for 2 hours, and you can ask any kind of question related to the system, technical, non-technical, it's all good. And then we will just dig into what you want to know about. And I see we had one question here from Arseni that we got before the broadcast started. So Arseni is asking, what is this string impl is fly? So that is related to fly strings. String impl is fly. And fly strings are deduplicated or unique strings. In some languages, they're called interned strings. So we have this class called flystring, which automatically deduplicates. So there's only ever one instance of each flystring, which makes comparison constant time. And the way flystring works is that it's really just a wrapper around a string impl, which is sort of the inner storage class of both our regular string class and of the flystring string class. So both of them point to a string impl, and then the string impl can be the flystring string impl, which means that if you look in the flystring table, which is just a hash table of all flystrings that we currently have live in the program, that is a hash table of string impls. So one out of every unique string impl in your program, one of them, wait, I'm not saying this right. A string impl can be marked as a flystring, and that means that it is in this table. So we need that when we destroy a string impl to know if we need to remove it from this table. So that is done in the string impl destructor right here. So it checks if it is the fly string impl, then it removes it from the table by calling out here. So if you're not familiar with string interning, you can read about it here, I guess, on Wikipedia, string interning. Let's see. Andrew Castor is asking, has there been any progress on pull request auto reviews? Or maybe on cloning? So as I understand the question, Andrew is asking about the large number of pull requests currently in the queue. I don't have any progress on my magical auto review bot that just reviews code, nor have I had any success cloning myself or anybody else, but attempts will continue. In the meantime, I guess we could probably look at something. So here's something from Idan. Some more out-of-memory hardening. All right, let's review a PR right now. Since we have 95 of them, let's get one out of the way. So what is he doing? He's hardening against out-of-memory conditions, and he has a set of patches for that. So the first one is about making the memory RingBuffer class fallible in its construction. So usually when we talk about making construction fallible, it means that we are switching from a code pattern where construction of a class is assumed to always succeed. And specifically, we assume that the allocation always succeeds. And that's not really safe in a kernel context because we have to allow allocation to fail and then propagate that error to either to the user space boundary where somebody can, react to it or log it or whatever, or we kind of have to swallow problems in some cases and kind of just fail kernel subsystems. So this one is making the RingBuffer class, instead of using the make convenience function here that just heap allocates a new object and constructs it, we now have a try create pattern. And then of course, this isn't really like taking it all the way, because he's switching it for the infallible make to a fallible try create pattern, but then immediately upon receiving, I assume, an error or something, he then uses release value, but fix me should propagate errors. And this is one of those obnoxiously named functions that we have, which I like to name things, these really horrible things, so that when every time you see it, you feel like, I really don't want to call this obnoxious thing. So this is just here to remind us that we really need to propagate those errors. Let's see. So what's going on here? Just switching out for a try create, sure. And what does that do? It tries to round up to page multiple. And then we try to allocate a contiguous kernel region, sure. And then we do this thing here where we try to allocate and construct. So this pattern, by the way, I always feel like is a bit chunky, but it's currently how we express, please allocate and construct a new object and give me an enomem error if allocation fails. Surely there must be a shorter way to express that, but that's where it is right now. All right, so that seems fine. Sure. And yeah, that one's good. Let's look at the next one. Wait, oh, dude, I'm in Firefox. I don't have my my usual GitHub keybinds. Okay, stop adopting non-heap memory into Onputters and vert.io queues. So we have been adopting non-heap memory into Onputters. That's pretty nasty. Onputter is like really, if you have a piece of memory that you're not going to deallocate, so the Onputter destructor is meaningless, it doesn't really make sense to adopt it into an Onputter, I think. Unless you, for some reason, you are required to pass an Onputter to some API, but then we could probably think of a better API. So what's been going on here is that we have been just, like mashing Onputters together from, what are these things even? Oh, they are region-backed memory. Yeah, that's nasty, because you can't destroy those Onputters, because then you'll try to key-free some region-backed memory, which won't be in the heap allocators. It won't know about that memory, so that seems fine. Okay, make vert.io queue construction fallible. Okay, so what we're looking at here, just so like if the function that we're in here, the device setup queue function, if that had been converted to return error or something, then we could just use a try macro here. But because the return type of the surrounding function is bool, we have no choice but to do it this old style way. Okay, and then the constructor, let's see, logic from the constructor is now being moved out to the try create factory helper instead. Seems very reasonable. And some things get wrapped in try. Yeah, so here's an example of like succeeding, right? So instead of just calling a release value here, assuming that the current region allocation succeeds, we now actually try the region allocation and allow it to fail. So very nice. Queue constructor now becomes a simple move data into place type constructor. That's great. Just checking. Oh, this is just removing the curlies. And removing an of in the comment. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. Sometimes, like if you have too many of these little style changes, it can become hard to read patches like this, because it's hard enough to sort of get a picture of what's happening in a diff without having to also deal with like random little style tweaks and comment fixes in adjacent but essentially unrelated pieces of code, right? But you know, this is a tolerable amount, but if it were more, I would probably whine a little bit about it. Let's see. Okay, and we are removing what is presumably an unused helper function. Oh, right. So this helper function becomes meaningless because we are converting MQ region to a non-null Onputter. So MQ region can now never be null, and because of that, the is null function can only ever give one answer, right? So this all looks good. Let's look at the next patch. Make ACP reboot infallible. Okay, so a lot of jargon here. Fallible. I guess that means that in conditions, we are able to fail an attempt to reboot via ACP, whereas previously, I guess we would just panic or something. Let's see. So yeah, more of those situations where we could use the try macro if we had a nicer return type. I wonder, validate reset register. So it's taking a typed mapping template as an input parameter. I guess that kind of just mirrors what we were doing already here. But, or well, no, that's fine. I was thinking like we could even take a structures FADT const amp directly instead of taking the entire type mapping sort of meta object or whatever. We could take this thing directly and just dereference the type mapping, but this is fine too. Okay, more situations that would be very tryable. But essentially it seems okay. So what is the essence here? We're just trying to propagate some failures. And here is the big failure. So we had one of these release value, but fixed me should propagate errors situation. And now we are just getting rid of that in favor of sort of unwrapping the logic and dealing with errors. So fine. I would have loved to see switching out the return type of these so we could use try if possible, but we can do that in subsequent patches as well. Like there's no need to do it in any particular order. So it seems okay. Support setting with non-copyable keys in HashMap. Okay, so apparently our HashMap class only had set and try-set API variants where they would take the key parameter as a const reference, and we didn't have an API that would accommodate move-only key types. But that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to have. So fine, great. Okay, kernel, use kstring instead of string in ext2fs inodes lookup cache. Okay, so the ext2 inodes, if they are a directory, then we keep a cache in them of all of the directory entries. It's sort of a cache that's a hash map from the name of the directory entry pointing at its inode ID. So let me show you what that thing looks like. There's lookup cache. Yes, it's this thing right here. It's a hash map of string to inode index. And for every file that's in a directory, we have the name of the file and its inode ID. And this is how we are able to do sort of fast, repeated lookups of directory entries. We just query this cache instead of like going to the disk every time and looking through the directory entries. But one big problem with this cache here is that it uses string, which the string API, while convenient, does not offer API to sort of deal with out-of-memory problems. So you can try to create a string, and if there isn't enough memory for that string, then the kernel would just panic. So that is pretty bad. Let's see, Buscard was asking, why is it not the other way around, inode to file name? So that's because the type of queries that you do is almost exclusively you're being asked, hey, in this directory, can you give me the file ABC, right? It's very rare that some program wants me to give it the name of a specific inode number in that directory, but we're being asked to find an inode by name all the time. So that's why the cache, the map is flipped that way. But yeah, so strings can fail to allocate, and then the kernel will just panic if that happens. So that's obviously not good in a kernel context. So this patch here aims to switch it out for a kstring, which is our kernel string class that is entirely built around an API that allows you to detect and handle memory, out-of-memory conditions. So what are we looking at? It's really just an API switch, right? Yeah, so allowing kstring allocation to fail. And then, oh, interesting. So when we're doing a find on the cache, I guess, because what is the type of the cache now? So the type is hash map of non-null Onputter to kstring, mapping to inode index. So the string class is kind of a syntactic sugar class that is really like a wrapper around a reference counting pointer. And here we just have a single owning pointer immediately. And we don't have like all this convenience stuff implemented that allows you to just like find into a hash map of these things without also providing an equality check function. So that's what he's passing here. It's like passing in the hash of the name explicitly and a way for the hash map to do equality compares while walking the buckets. So, you know, that's a little bit unfortunate, but at the same time, I think this was probably one of the few places that we use hash map of string to anything in the kernel. So it's not such a big deal. But it would be nice to eventually have a more convenient way, or like to allow more convenient use of kstrings as hash map keys without having to provide a comparison function every time. But it's totally outside the scope of this patch. Oh yeah, and here we were already doing this. Wonder why. There was probably some reason. Oh, probably because name was a string view and not a string. Anyway, yeah, this patch seems harmless. It's really just allowing failure to create the string to propagate. So that's great. And then just a straight up switch from string formatted to kstring formatted. And of course, kstring formatted, unlike string formatted, can fail. So here we go with another release value, but fix me should propagate errors. Another one for the conscience account. Okay, that seems okay. Use kstring instead of string in inode watcher event path. All right, and here we have some squiggly +1 math, but it's just migrating from up here, and it's really just making space for a null terminator at the end of a variable length string at the end of a structure, I guess. And Yeah, so this thing previously would have a string member. This is for inode watcher events where like you add a new child to a directory, for example, then we log an inode watcher event that a child with this name was inserted into this directory. And then you can pick that up from the event stream. And yeah, previously we used string, which could fail to allocate. Now we use kstring. And what does happen if we fail to allocate the string? We try to create it. And yeah, we just have it fix me. It's interesting because what should happen if everything else is fine, but we are unable to allocate a little bit of memory to put an event into the inode, like sort of the file system watcher stream. Should we still put the thing in there, but indicate that it had a memory problem or something like that? At the moment, it looks like we just put the... well, at the moment, it looks like we'll panic, actually, eventually. But this is still better, yeah. And the fact that it says fix me here means that we will find these later when we control F for fix me, so that's okay. So, like, just to expand a little bit on this type of name, the reason that we're using this obnoxious API, it's functionally equivalent to calling release value, but we're using this obnoxiously named API, which does the same thing, but this one we can control F for, right? So later on, when somebody is feeling generous and they want to take care of some of these, you can just search for this name and you'll find some of these. Whereas if we were to switch this to release value right now, it would be much harder to find it later because there are legitimate uses of release value, of course. Anyway, I think, well, those were all the commits and it looks really totally fine. So we are just going to merge. Boom. And we have 94 pull requests in the queue. Okay, so that took a little moment, but we got through it. And what was Andrew saying about that? Oh, now I can't even scroll my chat. No, I can. Okay. I was asking if I had any progress on auto reviews or maybe on cloning. No, but we can review code here on office hours. So at least some progress was made. Now, I would encourage everybody to participate and help out in code review, by the way, because we do have a lot of pull requests, as mentioned, and it's very, very helpful if people who are experts in various areas, if they go through things that seem interesting to them or that they know about, and just to take a cursory glance and say like, oh, this is good or this is not good because of this or that reason, just to sort of move things along. We also have a situation with, there's lots and lots of stuff in the queue that has like outstanding questions. So people have given feedback and then the author has just disappeared. Like we have lots and lots of pull requests like that. And those PRs will eventually get reaped by the stale bot, which just prunes ignored pull requests after a while. But it's kind of sad when that happens. But if somebody makes a pull request and then they just disappear instead of responding to feedback, there's not so much we can do unless somebody else steps up and cares enough about the PR to sort of continue moving it forward. Anyways, let's see. Probably I missed a bunch of things here. All right, let's catch up. Abhishek was saying, hey, AK, hope you're doing fine. I finally got my first software development job. Do you have any advice for someone entering dev career? Do I have any advice for somebody entering the career? I guess try to learn as much as possible and listen to the people that you end up working with. It's the coolest thing I think about working with other people is that every person you work with is an opportunity to learn something. And almost everyone that you meet in programming knows something that you don't, right? So take the opportunity to talk to everybody that you work with and find out what kind of interesting stuff you can learn from them. Let's see. And then Ryder Hitchhike was saying the wretched bool return value. Yeah, Boolean return values are honestly a kind of a hassle. I think they're not very expressive. And of course, there are situations where a Boolean return value makes sense. Like if you have a function that's called something like is valid, then of course it can return a bool. But for more nuanced things, it very often feels like you can do better than a Boolean return value, right? I mean, I'm sure we can find something that returns bool here that's kind of goofy. Yeah, so what does this mean? Bool flush super block, right? What does it mean if that returns true? What does it mean if it returns false? Hard to say. You know, I would assume from experience that it has something to do with maybe errors occurring, but we can probably do better in situations like this. And error or is a very nice return type. And in many cases, probably like in this case as well, this could really be like an error or void, because I imagine that it does something internally that could possibly fail, and then we can signal that to the caller and so on. But let's not get distracted with that right now. Jared was saying he's primarily a JavaScript developer, and removing curlies from conditionals can be a risky venture. That is true. In JavaScript, you have to be careful with removing some things like that. On the plus side, you have automatic semicolon insertion, or I don't know if that's on the plus side, but you have it. CYXXYC says, shouldn't try be smart and convert value to bool? I think Rust does it, and they have something like implementing a trait for converting result A to result B. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. I think I prefer using the like explicit return type instead of like you return a bool, so you can just try and errors will be sort of auto converted to a bool as well. I don't know if I like that, because then suddenly bool kind of always starts meaning an error occurred or error didn't occur, whereas it's not obvious. It's not necessarily the case that like we're always using bool to signal an error occurring. So you might like find yourself sort of in a place where you're using try somewhere, and then you're supposed to return a bool to signal something else, but now you're also inadvertently using it to signal the try condition failing, or the try statement failing. But I don't know. Tim Schumacher says, is it ACP or ACPI? I don't know. I always said ACP. Jared says, Andreas is the first person I ever heard call it ACP. I've only ever said and heard ACPI. Well, that, I don't know. I haven't heard many people say ACPI. But at the same time, it's one of those things, like I haven't talked to a lot of people about ACP in person. It's one of those things that I've had online conversations about, but not many offline ones. Let's see. Omni is asking, how is virtual address generated? That is a very broad question. What do you mean by that? Virtual addresses are they're just an address space, and you have two address spaces in a typical CPU, where you have like a virtual address space and a physical address space, and then the typical setup in, at least in Unix-like systems, is that you have a virtual address space where which is unique per process, and then the virtual addresses in your process each map to physical addresses in the underlying RAM, and they can also be sort of not mapping to any physical address, because physical memory backing can be lazily populated, and you can have virtual addresses that are just sort of monitored but not actually backed by anything. But the question is a bit broad, so I don't really know what to answer. Diego asks, hi Andreas, in a tweet you said limited hardware support, QEMU is our Mac. Does that mean that you don't expect Serenity to run on bare metal? Serenity already runs on bare metal. I don't know. I see a lot of conversations around the web about how Serenity doesn't run on bare metal. People say that it's a virtual machine only operating system, and I don't know where people get this idea because it already runs on bare metal. I have videos on my channel from like 2019 where it runs on my machines, at least SerenityOS booting on my machine. Right here, for example, is a video from September 2019 where I'm booting it on a PC right next to me here. But QEMU being our Mac, what I mean by that is I don't personally focus on bare metal support or driver support, and I'm instead like primarily interested in the QEMU environment at the moment. So that's where I focus on keeping that machine working well. But there are plenty of other people who spend time on bare metal support, like Leov, for example, and Luke, and Linus has been doing some stuff with that, and Jean-Baptiste, and there are more people, like Conrad, I'm just forgetting. But we have the bare metal channel on Discord where they congregate, and people help each other out to get stuff running on bare metal. So if you're interested in that, you can join the bare metal channel on Discord. And then Tommy was asking, cold brew tea, yay or nay? I guess probably nay. I prefer warm. I prefer nice warm tea. But I guess I do end up drinking some amount of cold tea. What is cold? Like, is that a special thing though? Cold brew tea? Or is it just iced tea? It seeps in water for hours in the fridge. I've had that a few times, and somebody told me to put baking soda into the tea, and that was pretty nice. It reminded me of iced tea, but not as sweet. But I still prefer warm tea. Definitely prefer warm tea, and do drink a lot of it, to be honest. Let's see. Arseny was saying, thanks for answering about flystrings. Had no idea string interning was so widespread. Yes, absolutely. String interning is a very valuable technique in any program that deals with a lot of strings. And if there's like potential for duplication, for like a lot of duplicate strings, then there are memory benefits to using string interning. And you can also have a lot of benefits from the constant time compare operation. Let's see, Vasil is asking, I was wondering if you use a project management solution yourself, and if so, which one? Or if there is a producer on your team to help focus the project. No, there's no producer on the project, and we don't have a project management solution, really. It's a herd of cats, and all the cats are just working on what they want, and then sometimes I try to get the cats to go sort of in the same direction, but not. I don't try too hard. I like it. I like the chaos. It's a beautiful chaos of people just kind of doing what they want and seeing how it comes together. All right, let's see here. Stuart was saying, have you had a time to watch any of the CPPCon 21 talks? If so, do you have a favorite? Also, what do you find is the greatest pain point in C++? I haven't watched any of the CPPCon 21 talks yet, I think. Or maybe I watched the Bjarne's talk when that was sort of pre-released on the JetBrains channel thing. I'm going to go back and watch some of the talks at some point, but I didn't yet. I don't know why. I guess I'm sure there are interesting talks. I just whenever I feel in a C++y mood, I more often end up just programming instead of watching talks about it. I don't know. I guess I struggle a little bit with talks because I have to like sit still and focus on what somebody else is doing for a while, and I sort of get like a little bit excited and I just want to do programming. But I'll definitely check them out at some point. If you have any recommendations of which ones were super awesome, I would love to know so that I can check those out first. Devashish says, the other day I learned that we can't return a derived class object from a function that is declared to return a base class object in C++. That is right. You can't do that because the derived class object may have a different or larger or incompatible memory layout. So the stack reservation that the caller made wouldn't match the object you're trying to return. So what you want to do is return some kind of pointer type instead. So if you return a pointer to base, then you are free to return any pointer to derived, of course. And I don't know if the backslash here meant that more text was coming as like part of a question. Is this part of that question? That allowed and a common practice in Java. What's the C++ approach to do something like that? Say, for example, I need to write a function that returns a block node, but which block node is only known at runtime. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, that you want to return a pointer to base instead of an object of base type, and you can use a smart pointer. So like that's what you would do in any kind of modern C++, is that you would just use smart pointer to the base block node type. Also, my mouse wheel is not cooperating with this window here. I don't know why. I have to scroll very hard to make it move. Let's see. Now it's stuck again. Jeez. All right. Omni was expanding. What I mean is, how do you keep track of used and free virtual addresses? Is tree structure good for this? Okay. So the thing we have in Serenity is we have this thing called a virtual range allocator. And this is the thing that manages the address space of a single process. So every process in Serenity has a virtual range allocator, and the virtual range allocator has a red-black tree that keeps track of the entire address space. And when you make a memory mapping with the mmap syscall, then we go and locate an available range in this tree, and then sort of carve that out. And when you munmap to deallocate the memory range, then we like put it back into the tree and sort of fuse together everything again. So a red-black tree is a very good data structure for this, for sure. The original implementation of our virtual range allocator used a vector, and it was a performance concern, and it was rewritten as a red-black tree, which is just a lot faster. I think Linux also uses a red-black tree. I don't know about the BSDs, but I would recommend a red-black tree for sure. And having a little bit of throat trouble here. But yeah, so I'd recommend looking at this class in kernel memory virtual range allocator.h. Let's see. Ominous Liticus says, I saw Live Overflow talking about root exploits in SerenityOS. Are these things you have thought about addressing? Well, what do you mean by addressing? The root exploits in SerenityOS that Live Overflow talked about, they were already fixed by the time he talked about them. And I was also in some of his videos about the subject, talking about how they worked and how we fixed them. So yes, of course, I'm very interested in fixing any kind of privilege escalation exploits, but there hasn't been a public one, at least, in a long time. And as you may or may not know, I have the bug bounty program for SerenityOS. So I will actually pay out $50 to anybody who finds exploitable bugs in these 3 categories here. So if anyone is interested in making a $50 bounty reward, then do check out the bug bounty program. I would love to actually pay somebody at some point and see some new exploits, because it's been like almost a year since the last time we saw a root exploit for the system. And yeah, you can also find a list here of all the past exploits if you're interested. Yes. Let's see. People saying tea is greater than coffee and coffee is greater than tea. I think we're all bros in the tea and coffee club. No need to fight about it. Let's see. Jared says, one thing I struggle with is nailing a good architectural design when building a complex system. Serenity, in my opinion, is very well structured. Do you have any tips on how you approach architecting? Sure. So the main thing that I do when I want to build out architecture is I like to make thin prototypes, and I very often refer to it as scaffolding, which what I mean by that is like building very tall vertical abstractions without necessarily implementing everything horizontally. So if I want to build a new library or a new server, I typically like sketch out a bunch of the classes and their relationships and so on. And I have countless videos where I do that. And I find that even if you build thin and you don't like fill out all the details, sketching out a larger part of the architecture that you want to implement, like if you sketch it out quickly, it helps you sort of discover big architectural issues much sooner than if you were to sort of build every layer of sediment until it's perfected. I've certainly used both approaches a lot in the past, and just building vertically quickly just to flush out architectural issues sooner is, I would say, almost always better. The one thing about it, I guess, is that it's harder to do when you're less experienced. So it's one of those things where you do need to get like a bit familiar with building things, and the best way to get familiar is by doing. So yet another chicken and egg problem, really, but you just have to suck it up and build things, and then you'll get better at building things. I hope that is understandable. Let's see. Dang scroll wheel. Let's see. CYXXYC says, I think I misread and I thought it was error or bool. What about is okay as Boolean? Not sure I understand that. You mean that the error or type would have an is okay / as Boolean thing? I think that's still like less explicit than I would like to be. I like it when the code says exactly what's going on. and with like some small set of exceptions, right? Like the try macro, we use that because if you say exactly what's going on in the try macro every time, then it's just so much more code. And the try macro like nicely encapsulates that. But I still feel like starting to make errors convertible to bool, even if it's explicit, it still seems weird. Like, I think the correct fix is to change the return type of the surrounding function rather than adding an API to make error or easier to use in those contexts, because I don't think there's any reason to keep returning bool from any of those types of functions that have like an internal potential for failure. And then Kleines Filmröllchen says, herd of cats, more like herd of yaks. Yeah. That's true. Herd of yaks. Chihiro says, yesterday I did my first code review in my life. I was shy a bit because it was my team lead's PR. I would say never be shy about code review. It is always nice to tell other people if you notice mistakes in their code. Anybody who is a reasonable person wants to know about mistakes in their code, right? So telling people that you found any kind of mistake or you noticed something that could be improved, they're usually going to appreciate that. Of course, there is such a thing as like the busybody code review type person that just points out meaningless things. Those people exist, but as long as you point out like legitimate issues, then people just appreciate it, I think. But I'm glad to hear that you did some code review. Very good. Let's see. Valtteri says, I saw your video from before. What an amazing coincidence that somebody is in exactly the same situation as me. Yes, that is an amazing coincidence. Because Valtteri is in exactly the same situation as the anonymous person that I talked about in the video, giving advice about job offers yesterday. What a coincidence. And congratulations again to the anonymous job getter. Shadowgut Toadmaster, which, by the way, is a very interesting name, says, how do you decide on what to focus on when learning about new concepts/tools in programming? It feels as if there are too many things for one person to learn. Well, I guess in my case, I always end up learning new things because I need something that I don't have or don't know yet. So, for example, I might have written some code that's running slowly, and I want to figure out like what algorithm could I use to make this thing go faster. So I have to go and I have to learn some new algorithm or some new technique or some new data structure. So because I have a fairly large repertoire of things I know about already, then I can sort of learn incrementally by learning new things as I need them. If you are newer in the field and you have like kind of an incomplete repertoire, then you can probably like learn almost anything. It doesn't really matter. Like almost anything you learn will be useful to you. So it's one of those things where like you don't want to have analysis paralysis or decision paralysis when you are a beginner at something. And I see that a lot in programming, and also I see it in the gym, especially in the gym. Like people start training and they think that they have to figure out like what is the objectively most optimal training program. And it doesn't really matter, because if you're really weak and untrained, you can do any training program and you will get stronger, right? And it's the same thing with programming. Like, you don't have to look for the perfect programming book or the perfect programming project. Like, just do lots of programming and you will get better. So I think when you want to learn new concepts and new tools, just try new concepts and new tools. Pick any of them. Like, it's unlikely that you will have a completely unproductive time, I think. Nias said, YouTube blocks all my comments. I asked last time about open source monetization and I'm now following your advice. Hopefully that goes through. LOL. Awesome. That's fantastic. I really hope that works out. Yeah, so last time we talked about, Niaz here asked about like my ideas about monetizing open source software, and I was suggesting that you can sort of monetize your personality and make content around the software that you're working on. So like you can make videos, blog posts, all kinds of content, and sort of use that as a way to draw attention to funding options. And it's not that I think that it's like the objectively best thing, but it's something that I know for a fact it's possible to do that because it works for me so far. So it's really the only recommendation I can make, honestly. So I hope that works out well for you, and I would love to hear more about how it goes as you go along. Omni says, I was thinking about using AVL tree, but I will look up red-black tree. Yeah, you could probably use an AVL tree as well, but the red-black tree seemed like a very reasonable option, and we have one of those in our code base, so that's what we're using. Let's see. And then Kleines Filmröllchen says, how about a review of 11482? What is 11482, I wonder? It's not on this page. Not on that page. Oh, here it is. Libcore, allow multi-threaded event loops. Okay. Well, we've looked at this before, or, well, not together, but I have looked at it before. So let's see what's going on. So libcore traditionally has been a very single-threaded user space library. We do have some amount of multi-threading happening in some places in the programs, but what Kleines here wants to do is just make it like more mature in a multi-threading context. And let's look at these patches for that. So Omni with the super chat. Thank you very much, Omni. Really, really appreciate the red heart and the super chat. That's nice. And apparently, or I don't know if this means that you are from Sweden or if you're just sending local currency to me, but either way, thank you very much. Let's look at these changes. Libthreading, introduce mutex protected generic synchronization primitive. Right. So mutex protected is a thing we already have in the kernel. So mutex protected is a template class that allows you to wrap some kind of value or some kind of object together with a mutex, and then you can only access it by calling a helper function where you pass a lambda, and then the lambda executes while the resource is locked, and it's sort of a way to synchronize something behind a mutex. We also have spinlock protected, which is the same concept, just with a spinlock instead of a mutex. So I think this here is just yoinking that idea and bringing it to user space as well. Yes, it looks extremely similar. So that's good. I don't think you need to do this, but I also don't care that much. Also, maybe I should make the type faces here a little bit bigger. Mutex lock count. Wait, what's going on here? Lock count. So why this lock count is not mentioned in the commit message? It's not initialized here. And is this meant to... I'm not sure exactly what it's meant to do. It's just to implement a verify. Yeah, okay, so it's just to implement some verify checks, which I guess is okay. But it would be good to mention like what this is for. So let's see, wait, what's going on here? Please initialize explicitly. Initialize primitive values. A click. Also, please explain what this is for somewhere. Maybe in the commit message. Boom, commented. All right, let's look at the next patch. Libcore, allow event loops to run on multiple threads safely. Ooh, let's read some pros here. The event loop system was previously very singletony, totally a word, to the point that there's only a single event loop stack per process and only one event loop, the topmost one, can run at a time. This commit simply makes the event loop stack and related structures thread local so that each thread has an isolated event loop system. Some things are kept at a global level and synchronized with the new mutex protected. The main event loop needs to still be obtainable from anywhere as it closes down the application when it exits. The ID allocator is global as IDs should not be shared between threads. And for the inspector server connection, the same as for the main loop holds. Note that currently, the wake pipe is only created by the main thread, so notifications don't work on other threads. This removes the temporary mutex fix for notifiers introduced in blah 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 blah. Okay. Yeah, so I had some commit 2 weeks ago where I slapped a mutex on something that was causing a bunch of flaky crashes. Sure. Okay, this already looks hairy. I don't know what's going on here. This is in some libcore test, which is just putting an event loop casually here in the thread function, which I guess is okay, actually. Okay, so let's see how this is done mechanically. We now have all of these statics in event loop.cpp. So all of these have previously been file local static global thingies, and now they become thread local. Sure, so the event loop stack, the set of timers, the set of notifiers, all become thread local, and also the wake pipes. Sure. Okay, so the model that we're going for here, let me grab a little text editor. So basically the idea is that you say that you have a bunch of threads, right? And previously, the way that we allowed this to work was that we would have an event loop here on the main thread, and then you couldn't really like instantiate a separate event loop here because there were tons of APIs like core object, deferred invoke, and whatever. All kinds of APIs that just go and poke directly at the main event loop. And what we're going for with these changes here is that we now allow construction of a separate event loop on any thread, and you can have a setup like this, and then if you call deferred invoke here, the deferred invocation will be posted to the thread's own event loop instead of like magically just ending up in the main thread event loop, and that will allow like a lot more nice things to be done. And this is very similar to how many other toolkits do threads, that you have like an event loop per thread, and then you can, I guess a common technique is if you want something you want one thread to tell another thread what to do, what you can do is you can post an event to the event loop on another thread. So say, for example, you have a worker thread here, right? So it would do stuff, and then at the end of do stuff, it would post event to main thread event loop. And then that thing would then receive event from worker thread. Very nice ad hoc diagramming here, but maybe you get the idea. Anyway, that's what we're kind of going for. So separate event loops per thread, basically. Let's see. So what's going on here? We're just switching these things out to be thread local, and then we're using the mutex protected template. What is that ID allocator used for anyway? I don't even remember. ID allocator is used to allocate an inspector server connection ID. All right. And a timer ID. So first reaction is that this is dumb. This is kind of dumb that like, why do we have to use a shared ID pool between inspector server connections and timers? There's absolutely no reason that they have to share an ID namespace. So I don't know why it's set up that way. Maybe it's something I did, but it's totally unnecessary. And I think we can already simplify that by like not sharing the ID namespaces. But also, like, he's not changing that in this PR. It's just an artifact. But it does make sense that everything on the thread would need its own ID namespace. Yeah, because if you talk about, or wait, let's think. Should timer IDs be globally unique, or should they only be unique within the thread? I guess it seems to me that there's no reason for one thread to refer to registered timers on another thread by ID ever. At the same time, what could happen is, say that you have a sort of a pointer to a timer object, because we have the core timer object. And what if I have a pointer to a core timer and then I tell it to stop? And then what the timer will do is we'll just call through to stop timer, which will eventually interact with the event loop. So you could be calling timer stop on one thread, but the timer was actually registered in another thread. So now you are trying to stop a timer with sort of a foreign timer ID. So I don't think timer IDs should be global, but I do think that we need to have some mechanism that stops you from like trying to access a timer from a thread where it doesn't belong. And maybe that's something that's addressed here, by the way. I don't know that yet. I'm just stopping to think. All right, let's just scan forward and see what's going on. So, or actually, it really feels like we could probably package all this stuff up into a sort of thread event loop data struct instead of having separate file local globals like this. It is one of those things. It's not the end of the world to have separate variables, but I would probably wrap them in a struct if I were writing this from scratch. Anyway, scanning ahead. Okay, sure. Thread local everything, blah, blah, blah. Using the with locked function that we talked about from mutex protected to do accesses. Sure. S main event loop with locked. this looks like I can't tell immediately, but I feel like I'm looking at some kind of time of check, time of use problem here, because you are locking this thing here and comparing it against something, and then we then enter into here and then do something based on that comparison, but we leave it unlocked and then relock it again down here. Looks a little bit iffy, but maybe it's safe. I'm just gonna ask, is there a talk to here? Should we keep the main event loop locked the entire time? Okay, sure. No need for a mutex locker here. Yeah, so this is the mutex that I added, and now it's just being removed. That's totally fine. I guess because, why is that fine? Because it's thread local anyway. Yeah, that's why it's fine, because no other thread is going to tamper with our notifiers. Yeah, that's actually really nice. Yeah, so here's again, like this kind of double lock and unlock makes me a little bit uneasy. Can we do this with a single lock instead of two? Because if you lock, like anytime that you're locking something and then unlocking it, and then you have like a little window of time, and then you lock it again, that window of time, there's always a chance that there's something you didn't think about in that window of time, right? And I find it easier to just try to lock things for as long as you need them instead of locking and unlocking like that. But it may be totally safe. I'm not even going to think too much about it now, because we are in the middle of office hours and we have to make some forward progress here. So I'm just coming in asking some questions. Initializing wake pipes. Okay, so what's this about? Create wake pipe on each thread. After the previous change, the wake pipe was only being created on the main thread by the main event loop. This change utilizes a flag to always initialize the wake pipe if needed. All right, so some background on the wake pipe, I guess. The wake pipe is a mechanism that allows any thread to wake up the event loop of another thread. Or at least it allows it for the main thread in the current iteration of the code base. And the way it works is that the main thread just opens a pipe, and any other thread can then write into that pipe in order to wake the main thread. And what we mean by waking the main thread is typically if a program is idle, then it's just sitting there in a poll syscall in the main thread, just waiting for events. And we have that the wake pipe is just part of the file descriptor set that we are polling on. So if you write anything into it, you just need to write 1 byte into it, and the thread who owns that wake pipe will just wake up and say, oh, somebody wrote into my wake pipe, and then that's essentially what it's for. So this is then about allowing wake pipes on every thread. To always initialize the wake pipe if needed. What does that mean, if needed? Initialize a wake pipes. All right. I almost feel like the s underscore prefix, which we typically use for like static file local variables, I almost feel like it should be something different for thread local, right? Because this isn't just a simple file local thing, it's actually thread local. So maybe it should even be like t underscore. But as I was talking about earlier, maybe it would be even nicer to wrap all of these boys into a struct, and then instead of accessing like this, you would just access into that struct. But I don't understand, what does it mean to always initialize the wake pipe if needed? It seems like we just always initialize the wake pipe. So because we're on GitHub, I can't comment directly on a commit message, even though I keep asking them for it. But it's not like they respond. There's nowhere to report bugs to GitHub in a transparent way. They have like this submit feedback form or feature request form. But I don't know if they go anywhere, but I have filed feature requests about this. I just want to be able to click here and then type a comment under the commit message, right? So that it would then be sort of tied to the commit message in the review interface. Anyway. What do we mean by if needed here? It seems to always get initialized. Yeah. David Palmer says, yes, oh my God, I would love if GitHub did that. Right? That would be such a lovely feature. And it's not like other Git services don't have it. I just don't know why GitHub doesn't. And if anybody knows anybody at GitHub, I would be very happy if you could poke them about that. But I don't know. Every time that I've talked to somebody at GitHub, I mention this, and it just, I don't know. I don't know how to reach the right people. Wonder if we could use some kind of core system wrappers here, turn this into a try thing. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of just reorganizing the code, so it's not the end of the world. So let's just move forward. All right, what's this? Libcore, fix signal handling race condition in event loop. The event loop is responsible for handling POSIX signals while it's running. The signal handler adds the signals to a wake pipe, which is then read after the selecting code in wait for event. Problems happen, however, when another signal comes in after the select wake. The signal will interrupt the next syscall, the read from the wake pipe, and the resulting EINTER in wait for event causes the program to crash. This is undesirable. Yes, that is indeed undesirable to crash. I agree. Instead, we want to retry reading as long as we are interrupted. Yeah, totally. EINTER is one of those silly things about Unix systems that like syscalls just return early with EINTER if your thing has a pending signal, and then you just have to deal with that signal. It's just how it is. Let's see. So what's going on here? It's saying we might receive another signal while reading here. The signal will go to the handled signal properly, but we get interrupted. Therefore, just retry while we were interrupted. Sure. Yeah, so here we are reading from that wake pipe, as I talked about earlier. Somebody may have written into it, and we can just, as long as we read from it, I guess we really just want to drain it here. The main reason to read from the wake pipe is so that you can go to sleep again, or you can block again in poll without the wake pipe immediately waking you back up, right? So you have to drain the wake pipe if it has pending data. And yeah, this is a typical dance. So while you have an error reading and the error is EINTER, then you just do it all over again. Classic. All right, what else? Libcore plus tests. Inform the code and people about global event loop ban. Let's see. It is a bad idea to have a global event loop in client application, as that will cause an initialization order fiasco in ASAN. The only remaining application that does this is test crypto, which is not something we need anyways anymore. Okay. Therefore, this commit changes two things: removing test crypto and adding a note to the above behavior to the global main event loop variable. I guess it meant to say a note about the current behavior. Typo in commit message. A note about. A Canadian note about. All right. Right, and then, yeah, so we're just yeeting the entire test crypto utility because it was doing a globally initialized event loop, which is one way to get rid of it, I guess. And then, oh, look at this. Note, if you came here due to an initialization order fiasco, you probably created a global event loop variable. That is a bad idea, and you should feel bad. No, you should stop doing what you're doing right now. All right. Is there a pattern that we can use to catch this instead of like having this sort of slightly condescending comment that you might eventually run into if you debug this? Can we catch this programmatically at runtime instead, perhaps? Maybe libc could have an internal API that tells you if initial all init time constructors have executed or something. I don't know. I feel like it would be better to, if somebody makes a global event loop object and then it screws up static initialization order, it would be really nice if we could just tell you, hey, you are currently in init time constructor execution and we are making an event loop even though we're not supposed to. So that could be a thing, perhaps, or maybe there's even a smarter technique that I'm not thinking of. But whenever it comes to comments like this, I always feel like it's nicer if you can save people time by telling them something went wrong instead of like letting them debug it and then ending up at some comment that you wrote about the mistake that they probably made if they're looking at this thing, right? So anyway, it's sometimes these things are obviously super helpful. It's just, I think we should always ask ourselves when we write comments like this, is there some way I can flag this problem at runtime? So here I do think that we could. We can probably come up with something. And I guess those are all the commits. All right, so yeah, that was interesting to look at. Some issues came up, so I will let Kleines Filmrollchen take a look at that and maybe respond to those things. But thank you for bringing that up. It was nice to look at it. It's looking good. Like, I really like where it's going. It just had a few question marks, I guess. So let's see. Catching back up, Breadhead23 said, "Hi Andreas, I like your workflow of implementing the naive implementation first and then increment. But how to stop the project just becoming naive implementations and just spaghetti glued together? In the beginning, this didn't bother me much, but now the more I'm learning, the harder I find it for some reason." Well, I guess the real trick is, if you feel like you're just building naive stuff and it's all just spaghetti, then that's probably time to start improving some of the scaffolding that you've built, or start filling in some floors in your building, right? So I know that it's often tempting. It can be like almost like a rush, right, to build something tall really quickly. And it's tempting to just, once you build a tall scaffolding, to just go to the next plot and start building the next big scaffolding. But if you want to mature your software, you have to actually start fleshing out the ground floor and maybe even a basement below and so on. Start filling in some of the abstractions on the way up. So yeah, I mean, the way you stop making only naive implementations is that you slow yourself down and actually improve some of the things that you've been stacking, I guess. Otherwise, yeah, of course, it's easy to end up with just a collection of naive implementations. But in Serenity, what often happens is that somebody builds like an initial implementation of something, and then oftentimes they sort of lose steam at some point, and then they go and work on something else for a bit, and then they come back to the thing again later, and now instead of like building taller and taller, they instead sort of refine what's there and iterate on it, or somebody else comes in and does that. I think if you're doing something all by yourself, you have to be disciplined about these things. If you are working in a project like Serenity, there's so many people that sometimes you just get lucky and like you build a naive implementation of something, then you ignore it for a bit and work on something else. And while you're doing that, somebody just comes and fixes everything for you, which it's fun when that happens. And maybe you don't learn your lesson, but it is very fun. But yeah, I think assuming that you're working alone on something, you just need to hunker down and discipline yourself into refining some of the stuff that you've written instead of like continuing to make more naive, simple implementations of things. Raghav was asking a dummy question. How do you drag your screen while clicking in the middle of the screen instead of clicking screen header? I assume you mean how do I drag windows around like this? This is something I do by just holding Alt and then click dragging the window. I can also resize by holding Alt and click dragging with the right mouse button. But really it's just holding Alt and using the mouse. Let's see. Bonnie Simon was asking, do you try to implement a new data structure directly on the project, or do you try to implement it elsewhere? What is your approach? If I need a new data structure, I just, and I need it for something in Serenity, then I just implement it in Serenity. But of course, sometimes I just sketch it out on Godbolt or like in a little temporary CPP project locally if I want something that compiles in less than 1 second, because if you're iterating on something that you're unfamiliar with, it can be a lot nicer to do that in a completely stripped down environment, right? So if I have to mess with something, I would probably do something like this, test thing, and then I would start just a simple thing here where I would sketch out my cool data structure, blah, 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 blah. And then I would make that thing here. Of course, it's not going to compile because I didn't actually write the cool data structure, but this is sort of my workflow if I'm just trying to figure out how something works and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. But ultimately, I usually bring it into Serenity as soon as possible. Let's see. Ecoptic says, hello, Uncle Andreas. Well, hello, my nieces and nephews. Yes. Good to see you here. Yuval was asking, how do you not get distracted by your environment when programming? I constantly get distracted by stuff when I'm programming, and it makes me a lot less productive. And then Jason had the same question. So what I do is I try to strip down my environment as much as possible. So as you may have noticed, I am sitting here in a very small room. Some might call it a closet. And I don't have anything in here to distract me. And I'm just looking at the screen and the wall and some of those acoustic foam thingies on the wall. But really, I try to keep the environment as empty and boring as possible. And That's really my main trick. And I'm extremely easily distracted. So whenever I've been working in sort of open office plans or around other people, my productivity goes down to a fraction of what I can do when I'm sitting like this, like totally encapsulated in a little room. But everybody's different, of course. I think cutting out distractions is probably the most important thing that you can do. And you have to identify what kind of distractions mess with you the most. For some people, it's like sound distractions. Other people are distracted by visual things. But yeah, like try to identify what type of things distract you and then see if you can make your environment rid of those things as much as possible. And then, of course, you know, all the basics, like don't do a bunch of bullcrap on your computer. Like don't, if you don't want to be distracted, if you find yourself distracted by, you know, YouTube or Twitch or Discord or browsing the web or Facebook or whatever, try to do less of that. Like maybe you don't have your phone on the table with you. Maybe you put your phone in your pocket. All kinds of little things. But it all goes back to what you find personally distracting, I think, and looking at that honestly. Let's see. Richard says, thoughts on running ZFS under SerenityOS? For me, it's one of requisites for running an OS before I use it for day-to-day activities. This is not a request for feature, just curious of your opinion. My opinion is that anybody who wants to run ZFS under SerenityOS is welcome to implement ZFS for SerenityOS. That is my opinion. And it would be fun to see an implementation of that. For sure. Jbar says, does Serenity use Wayland? No, it has its own protocol. Everything is homegrown, as Andrew Castor says here. Lixbin says, how do you feel about pure functional programming? No side effects, no in-place mutable data. I haven't done enough functional programming, pure or impure, to have opinion about it that's worth hearing. So I'm just not going to comment. Let's see. Computer Aided World says, today I have an interview for IT support, and that video you just uploaded last night, even though it's orientated towards more of a seasoned programmer, it was still nice. I appreciate your insights. Well, I'm glad you appreciate that. And the video I uploaded yesterday, it's not necessarily only targeted towards seasoned programmers. Really, in any situation when you're being hired for a job, even if you're like totally new, you can still ask for a small increase in pay. Like they're not going to reject you for like daring to ask for a few % more, right? I think that's something I really believed when I was younger, that I would get in trouble if I would ask things like that. And of course you don't. Although I did see some headline the other day. Was it about, I don't know what it was about. It was Amazon or something, where somebody got a pay cut for daring to ask for more money, but like it was some ludicrous thing. Anyway, let's see. Man, have to see where the heck I was. Andrew was commenting that the actual events could either be the signal number or 0 for a cross-thread wake. That could be a thing. Yeah, for sure. John says, hello, Andreas. What are your thoughts about privacy, biometric identification, and being a public figure? Well, I think it's funny that you ask about that, because yesterday when I sat down to make a car talk video, I thought I was going to talk about privacy, but I ended up talking about some career advice stuff instead. So I think privacy is important, and it's really, really important, and but it's something that needs to be optional for people. Like some people, everybody wants a different degree of privacy, I think. And obviously, like as you say, being a public figure, like I've chosen to give up some amount of privacy online in order to create more personal content. And it's definitely not something that everybody can do, everybody wants to do, but it's something I choose to do. I realized that just by making all these videos and like having all of this recordings of me available, video and audio, you could probably like recreate me, or at least recreate me using some kind of AI, right? And that maybe that would cause some trouble for me someday. I don't know. So I do think it's important to let everybody have a choice in the matter, like how private they want to be online. And when I was younger, I always just wanted to do everything in text. I was very afraid of even sharing a picture of myself online for a while, but then I sort of I've gone back and forth on that. Nowadays, I'm quite comfortable with myself, so I don't mind sharing these things online. But of course, even though it might not seem that way, I'm still a very private person in some aspects of life. Like I share things about myself and my life, my career, and so on, but I don't talk about my friends or my family in any kind of detail, right? Because that's private. So, and that also goes into the whole part about like degrees of privacy and letting everybody choose for themselves what they want to share. I guess I think that's what I think. I think it's really important to have a huge range of options that allow people to select what they want to share, what they want to be private, and how they want to present themselves online. Like if you want to hide behind a nickname or be completely anonymous, I feel that those are really important things that need to exist to have a healthy online community, healthy online discourse. This push that I see from some people for like everybody has to share their identity online and be like a verified real person and so on. I think that's very detrimental to having like free and open discourse, because you can't really, there are like people who are in dangerous situations, right? That might be they want to talk about something, but if their local government or whatever, whoever's after them would know what they were saying, then they would get in trouble. So I think you do need to have the option for people to choose to be anonymous, I guess. Anyways, I don't have the most structured thoughts about this, but those are indeed some of my thoughts about these subjects. And as it goes, as far as like biometric identification goes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. It seems like an inevitable thing to me that that people will get hold of some biometric data and start databasing it somehow eventually anyway. And it would be good to come up with something that cannot be taken from you. Something you can't like just sample somebody by yoinking a hair from their scalp or whatever, but some kind of identification that lives in your brain only, that can't be extracted, would be a good thing. I don't know what that would be. Anyway, let's see. Now I'm far behind. Ooh, Zexa with the super chat. Thank you very much, Zexa, for the super chat. Saying 10,000 plus glyphs in our fonts. Worth celebrating. Good work, everyone. Zexa is a total workhorse, let's say, when it comes to making all of these font glyphs. It's absolutely wild how many glyphs we have now, thanks to Zexa. Let's take a look at where we are. If we just casually bring up font editor and we just scroll down, and I mean the Unicode space is still very large. So I'm gonna make it a bit wider, but all these random ones that look so interesting, and now we just have them. I don't even know what these are called. Oh, you can actually see down here what they're called. This is a Chakma letter raw. Zexa has been making the most of these for sure, but some other people have been helping out as well. I think, who is it? Electric Milk or whatever they're called. Just adding more and more of these rad Unicode glyphs. And I wish there would be an option that would like take me to the next part that has glyphs, so I could sort of scroll through all the available glyphs and not have to see the missing ones. Maybe that should be a special mode, like hide missing glyphs. There's some yak bait for you. Anyways, thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you for just doing such a awesome work with our fonts. It is crazy, just the amount of coverage we have in these bitmap fonts now. Let's see. Radiant Mango says, why not do code sketches in Hack Studio instead? That's a fair question. Maybe I should have done that. I should do that. Let's see. River says, is there any way to do programming for a living instead of selling yourself for wage slavery? Sure. I mean, there are something that exists today that is relatively new in the great scheme of things is the app stores, right? Anybody who knows how to do programming can make an app and sell it on the app stores. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity for anybody who's sort of driven to make things by themselves. That's one thing. You can also make online services like websites, super easy to make these days. You don't have to go and work for a company if you have the drive to make something by yourself. But I think the reality is just that many people want to work at companies. They want to work on a team and work with other people and be around others, because it's just, most humans like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And definitely not something to look down on. It's just human nature. We are social creatures, right? And some of us are a little bit weird, and we end up wanting to do something by ourselves, or like these weird things like what I do, which is perhaps not the most common thing, but there are ways. You just have to, like, whenever you want to color outside the lines in life, you have to realize that you're going to be on your own. Like, nobody's going to tell you how to color outside the lines. That's there are plenty of people who would try to sell these things to you, but there isn't really a blueprint, and that's part of what that life is about. It's about finding your own path. So you can definitely support yourself as a programmer in other ways, but you have to find the way. That's part of the package. Walter says, today I learned that you can just pass the name of a C or C++ file to make, and it does what you want. Yes, it is one of those nice things that just works in the way that you might expect. Let's see, Ecoptic says, Andreas, I'm curious, how does an operating system implement the std library? I know that in kernel you can't use stdlib, but how do you go to that point? I hope you understand what I mean. So I'm not entirely sure what you mean. How does an OS implement the std library? If you're talking about like how does a kernel implement typical C standard library functions like memset and things like that, basically we just implement them. Like, look, here's our strlen, for example. We don't have a standard library that provides a strlen, so we just write a strlen. And whatever standard C library functionality you want, you just have to implement it yourself. It's not that hard, really. Like, anybody can write Anybody can write half of a Z standard library without too much trouble if you're a competent C programmer. The other half can be finicky, but all the basic stuff like strlen, memcomp, strcopy, these type of things, you can get all those done. Let's see. Alex Gravener says, not being distracted by YouTube is harder than it seems. Yes, I suppose I have to take some responsibility for distracting all of you with YouTube at this moment. But I do really appreciate that you're all here. And I hope I can instill some good vibes and it'll be worth it that you came here. And maybe we can even get a little bit excited about programming for the weekend. Let's see, Esseler says, Dear Andreas, I just arrived. I don't know if it was asked before. Is it true that you program the kernel entirely in C++ without using C? Sure, yes. The kernel is C++. There is no C really in the project. It's all C++. Let's see. Oh, Snotface says, hey, it's me, Electric Milk. Yay for 10,000 glyphs. Some of you people have just interesting nicknames like Snotface and Electric Milk are apparently one and the same. And that goes well with what I was talking about, how I really feel like people should be allowed to present themselves how they want online, right? If you want to be Snotface or Electric Milk, of course you should be. And I think it's important that we preserve that aspect of the internet, that we let people be who they want to be online. At least that's the internet that I grew up with. So that's the internet I would like to keep. Let's see, Devashish was saying, you were afraid to use any format but text when you were younger. What made early internet folks privacy aware? When I was younger, I used to post my phone number on public forums to get free coupons. Shoot, what made us privacy aware? I don't know. Like I was pretty naive about a lot of things back then. I think, I guess a lot of things like I kind of learned the hard way. Like I learned the hard way that if I just run exe files that somebody sends me on IRC, then my computer starts acting funny. That was like I was like 12 years old or something. Somebody sent me a game on IRC and I was like, oh, I want to play a game, right? So I kind of learned the hard way that like people are dishonest online and they try to mess with you. And then, of course, after I reinstalled Windows on the computer, I try to figure out how to do that same thing to somebody else. And it was, I don't know. But it was a lot more playful back then because even though you could do something to get access to somebody else's computer to just mess around with them or something, but because I was growing up in a time like before online commerce was really big, so people didn't have like all of their online banking accounts and like credit card numbers and stuff like that. Like that was not really something that was common back then. So it was more about just like messing with each other, but it was still frustrating enough to get messed with that it made me learn not to fall for these stupid things. I don't know that there was like some big watershed moment that made everybody privacy aware, but at least in my case, it was from just interacting with like mischievous communities, let's say, online that would just mess with each other. But I certainly like posted my phone number on public forums and things like that in the past, in the far past, just to see if somebody would call. Strange times they were. Let's see. Zexa says Alt plus right jumps to the next available glyph. So clicking on any empty area and then Alt right and you see glyphs. Ooh, that, my word. That's so sweet. Okay, that's a super nice feature. All right. So It's still very keyboard pressy, but obviously. Wow, look at all these cool symbols. So like collapsing all the missing glyphs. Maybe I should do that feature myself. I don't know. If nobody else does it. Shield, very cool. Okay, now I just want to sit here and look at all the different glyphs that you've been drawing. It's a little sailboat. Oof. That's an awesome feature. Alt right. I didn't know that. Let's see. Jagger says, "Ah, crap, I'm late." Well, hello, friends. Well, hello, Jagger. Do you happen to know how much of WebAssembly libwasm implements? I do not know that, but I'm sure that my good friend CXByte, also known as Ali, can answer that question if he's around, or otherwise you can ask on Discord in any of the channels. Just ask about WASM. What is the support % status or whatever. Let's see. Ian William Bolferini says, dumb question. What is a ref putter in Serenity? Is it a pointer or is it a reference? It is a reference counting pointer. And you will find those right here in the documentation section. We have a file called smartpointers.md, and it describes our main smart pointer classes. I really recommend anybody who works on SerenityOS to familiarize themselves with all of our smart pointers, because they are just used throughout the code base everywhere. So it's really important to know about them. And yeah, that's where you can read about them, Ian, and learn what they're for and how to use them. Let's see. Cbot says, have you heard of suckless software? If so, do you like their philosophy? I've heard of it, but it seemed like kind of abrasive, so I was not interested in learning much more about it, I guess. Esther says, there, Andreas, would it be a good idea to add partial Linux compatibility to the kernel build for some convenience? I don't know what that would be convenient for. It's definitely not something I'm personally interested in doing. I guess you mean like partially supporting Linux binaries or something. The thing is with Linux software is that almost all Linux software that I want to run is available in source form. So I would rather just compile it for Serenity instead of trying to run Linux binaries on Serenity. I feel like there's a vanishingly small legitimate use case for such functionality. Of course, there are some closed-sourced Linux applications, but I'm not sure. I certainly don't care enough personally about that use case to dig into it. But maybe somebody does. I don't know. Valtteri says, working on collapsing empty glyphs. Ooh, somebody got yak baited. Okay, and then Ali says, about 92% of WASM support, presumably. I don't know if that, like, I can't tell here if this is like the real answer or if he's just like sharing with us a number from the place that numbers come from. I had a manager at Apple who would sometimes refer to the place where numbers come from, and I thought he meant something serious the first couple of times he said it, but then I realized he just meant that it's just a made-up number. So, yes. Let's see. Ryan says, hey, Andreas, not a question, but thank you for what you do. I'm having so much fun with systems programming and hobby operating system development, and watching you work on Serenity always makes me so excited for programming. Fantastic. That is exactly what I want to achieve with my YouTube channel, with these live streams, with everything. It's all just about... in the end, it's all just about getting more people excited about programming. Whether you work on stuff together with me or stuff by yourself, stuff with other people, it's all good, right? I just want everybody to enjoy programming. So very nice to hear that you're having a good time. Mehdi says, what do you think about competitive programming? Is it worth spending time on that? I think if you enjoy it, it's totally worth spending time on it. If you don't enjoy it, I'm not sure it's worth spending time on it. I think you could find some way to program that you enjoy and you will get more out of it. With many of these things, I think you can do these things for good reasons and for bad reasons. And if you feel like you have to do competitive programming, or you have to do lead code, or you have to do whatever, but you don't enjoy it, there's probably a totally different way to engage with programming that would teach you just as much, but you would have fun while doing it. And I would suggest looking for that way so that you optimize for fun. At least when you're spending your free time on programming, you really want to optimize for fun, because you will burn out if you don't do that when it comes to free time programming. Let's see. Daniel J says, I work as a programmer and I have my first review meeting today. What should I expect and how can I prepare, etc.? Also, can I ask for a raise? Is a large jump realistic? I got offers from much higher and I'm currently getting paid much lower than I should be. Not sure how to ask. Well, I don't know how your performance has been, so I don't know what you should expect in the meeting. The best way to prepare, I mean, assuming that we're talking about like a review of your performance over the last so and so many months or last year or whatever, a good way to prepare would be to just go over what you have been working on in that period and sort of just write maybe like a little list of items that you worked on and things that went well. And also maybe if you remember some things that you struggled with, you can write those things down, because typically in performance review, you want to cover both like what you've been doing well and where you need to improve going forward, right? So by preparing yourself with a list of those things, so that it shows that you already know what you're doing well and what you need to improve, that already makes you look a lot better than if you come unprepared, I guess. And then you're also asking if you can ask for a raise. Sure, you can always ask for a raise. I think I didn't understand that when I was younger, but you can absolutely always ask for a raise at any time, because the worst thing that can happen is that they say no, right? They're going to say, no, I'm not able to do that right now. And they give you some reason, and that's that. But you can always ask. And not sure how to ask. You can really, there isn't a magic trick how to ask for a raise, right? But to an extent, of course, it depends on, if you're doing a performance review, then of course it depends on how your performance has been. If you've been doing well and your manager agrees that you've been doing well, then you can just ask, well, since things have been going well, would it be possible for me to get a raise? That's it, right? If things have been going really badly, you're in a worse position to ask for a raise. But even so, you can still ask, right? Because even if you're doing badly, you can still, there's some way to argue that a raise would help you. Like maybe a raise you don't feel sufficiently motivated because you feel like unfairly compensated, or you can come up with some reason why you should get a raise even though you're doing badly. But I hope that you've been doing well and you won't have to do mental gymnastics to justify a raise. But don't worry too much about it, and just put on your big boy pants and ask. And I don't think you would regret that. Let's see. Ines says, similar question as above. Grinding lead code questions is good idea? ? Grinding lead code is a good idea if you enjoy grinding lead code. If you don't enjoy grinding lead code, I'm not sure it's a good idea. Many people seem convinced that one must grind lead code in order to get hired. I don't agree with that view. There are absolutely some companies where they will specifically test if you've been grinding lead code in interviews and they, for some reason, they want to only work with people who grind lead code religiously, but you don't have to work there, you know? You can work somewhere else. There are plenty of jobs where you don't have to be a lead code grinder if you don't enjoy it. If you enjoy grinding lead code, knock yourself out. And then you can go work at lead code type companies like Google and places like that if you get super master good at lead code. I personally never enjoyed those types of things like lead code, and I never worked in one of those places where they value it extremely highly, so I don't actually know what those places are like on the inside, because I found their interview process kind of I don't know, repellent, I guess. So I didn't even want to go through with the interviews there. Let's see. But if you like it, then do it. User says, hi Andreas, you say that if someone wants something in Serenity, they should implement it. What are some examples of feature you would reject? So the typical answer I give to this question is, if somebody wants to add any kind of user tracking or telemetry, things like that, for example, that's something I would totally reject. Telemetry will never ever happen, obviously, in this system, because that would be very silly. I think there are many other things I would reject as well, like something that comes up sometimes is that somebody wants to have like some parts of the system would be written in a different language. Like somebody says, oh, I want to write this component, but I only want to use C. I always reject that, because it's like the system is written in C++ and everything is standing on top of a shared set of abstractions. So it doesn't make sense to come in and build something with C just because, you know, whatever reason you wanted to do that. And there are like various things that are just not a nice fit for the system. Recently, somebody wanted to build a Java virtual machine, and I rejected that because the system has no relationship to Java, and there isn't like a natural fit for a JVM on the system. And that's not, I don't want to discourage anybody from building a JVM in general. Like, if you want to do that, go ahead, but it just doesn't fit naturally into the system, because SerenityOS is a native code C++ GUI desktop system with a C++ kernel, and that's just kind of how it is. Richard Ochodsky says, ZFS is in C, so the only code in C++ would be the glue. Well, no, C++, everything would be C++, because if we would have ZFS and SerenityOS, it would be a new implementation in C++. We do everything from scratch. We don't import existing code into Serenity. That would be no fun. So it would be all C++. Let's see. Cbot was saying, does the Serenity kernel have Spectre and Meltdown mitigations? If so, how did you implement it? It has partial mitigations, not full. Like there's a lot of techniques that we maybe should consider implementing, like kernel page table isolation and things like that. But we do some things, like disable the high frequency timestamp counter thingy that you can use to get cycle counts from the CPU. We disable that for user space programs so that you can't use that as a high precision time source to do timing attacks. But yeah, the KPTI thing we should probably consider doing, but I don't think anybody has looked into it. Let's see. Jagger DeLeo says, it's shitty, but it does seem like most raises come from job hopping in this field, or at least the biggest raises anyway. Yeah, I mean, that is true, and it's true in many fields. Job hopping maybe it's sad, but it is reality that like if you want a big fat raise, you probably want to look into switching jobs because it tends to be easier to go somewhere new and enter at a higher salary than it is to convince your current employer to raise you to that salary. That's just kind of how the world is. Jeff says, hello, not sure if anyone has asked this yet, but what is your usual gym routine? So I've had many different routines over the years. I was doing PPL or push-pull legs for a couple of years, but recently I have been switching to a almost like powerlifting program instead, where I just do the big three and just focus on getting stronger. So today I'm going to do squats and heavy squats and light bench, I guess. But I always do barbell training. Like I'm almost entirely working with barbells because I enjoy the free weights. I don't use machines very much. And oh wait, shoot. I am running late and I'm over time. Damn it. Okay, I gotta go. So thank you all very much for coming and for hanging out with me here on Friday afternoon. I really appreciate the company, and I am so thankful for all the super chats, all the questions, and all the good vibes. I hope that everybody will have a great weekend just hacking on whatever you hack on. And if you do hack on SerenityOS, do come by the Discord server and tell us about what you're working on. And to the people who got their code reviewed, thank you for being guinea pigs. I appreciate that you let me do that. I guess you didn't let me, I just did it, but thank you anyway. And I will see you all next time, so ciao.